The escape pod screamed through the atmosphere of the unnamed planet, trailing smoke and fire like a dying comet. Inside, Marcus Webb gripped the harness straps until his knuckles turned white, watching the altimeter spin downward with terrifying speed. His ship, the merchant vessel Reliance, was now scattered debris in orbit, torn apart by pirates who had underestimated human resilience but overestimated their own aim. The pod slammed into the canopy of an alien forest, branches thick as bridge cables snapping like kindling before the hull finally wedged between two massive trunks. Marcus hung sideways in his restraints, ears ringing, tasting copper. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye. He released the harness and tumbled onto what had become the pod's wall, groaning. "Emergency beacon active," the computer announced in its irritatingly calm voice. "Estimated rescue time, 14 standard days." 14 days. Marcus checked his supplies. 3 days of water, 5 of rations, a survival kit with basic medical supplies, a multi-tool, and 1 plasma cutter with maybe 4 hours of charge. No weapons beyond a utility knife. He pushed open the hatch and climbed into the alien wilderness. The forest was wrong in ways that made his hindbrain scream warnings. The trees grew in spiral patterns, their bark moving with slow, breathing motions. The undergrowth glowed faintly with bioluminescence that pulsed in rhythm with something he couldn't identify. 3 moons hung visible in the daylight sky, each a different color. Marcus picked a direction and walked out by the second day. His water was gone. The rations were half depleted. He'd found a stream, but without knowing which microorganisms might kill him, drinking was a gamble he couldn't take yet. Hunger gnawed at his belly. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, and his emergency beacon sat silent. On the 3rd day, he saw the smoke dot. It rose in a thin column from beyond a ridge covered in the spiral trees. Marcus approached carefully, survival training from his brief military service returning unbidden. He crept to the ridge's edge and looked down into a valley. The village sprawled below like something from humanity's ancient past. Circular dwellings made of stacked stone and thatched roofs surrounded a central square. Figures moved between buildings, tall and lean, their skin ranging from deep copper to burnished bronze. They wore simple clothes and carried spears with leaf-shaped blades that caught the sunlight. Aliens, indigenous people. Marcus weighed his options. Approach and risk hostility, or avoid them and likely die of thirst and starvation in the forest. His throat felt like sandpaper. The decision made itself. He stood and began walking down the slope toward the village, hands raised and empty. He was halfway down when the first alien spotted him. The figure stood at the village's edge, froze, then released a ululating cry that pierced the air. Within seconds, warriors poured from the dwellings like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Marcus counted at least 40, all armed, all moving with the fluid grace of predators. They formed a loose semicircle around the village's edge, blocking any approach. Marcus kept walking, hands still raised, moving slowly. He was 30 meters away when one warrior, larger than the others, and wearing what looked like bone armor, stepped forward. The warrior raised one hand. Marcus stopped. They studied each other across the distance. The warrior's face was angular, with large eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. Ritual scars formed patterns across his cheeks and forehead. He said something in a language of clicks and melodic tones that Marcus couldn't begin to comprehend. Marcus pointed to himself. "Human, lost, need help." The warrior tilted his head, then spoke again to his companions. Several responded, their voices overlapping. The large warrior raised his hand again, and silence fell. He pointed at Marcus, then made a complex gesture that seemed to encompass the village, the forest, and the sky. Then he lowered his hand sharply. 12 warriors stepped forward as one. their spears coming back in throwing positions. Marcus's military training assessed the situation in a heartbeat. Leaf-bladed spears, approximately 2 meters long. Throwing range of 30 meters. 12 combatants with clear line of sight and trained. Coordination. He was going to die here. The spears flew. Time seemed to slow as adrenaline flooded Marcus's system. Humanity's gift and curse. The same chemistry that had driven his ancestors to hunt mammoth and cross oceans now supercharged his nervous system. The 12 spears became 12 vectors in his mind. 12 trajectories calculated by a brain that evolved to track prey across savannas and predators through tall grass. He moved. The first spear passed through the space. His chest had occupied a fraction of a second before. The second would have taken his throat, but he was already dropping, rolling left. 3 more spears converged on his rolling position, but he planted his hand and pushed, launching himself perpendicular to his previous motion. The spears buried themselves in the earth with solid thunks. 4 down. 8 remaining. Marcus came up running, not away but forward, changing his vector constantly. A spear grazed his shoulder, cutting through his flight suit, but missing flesh. Another passed so close to his head, he felt the wind of its passage. He juked right, then immediately left, and 2 more spears crossed behind him. 6 down. 6 remaining. The warriors watching began to murmur. Marcus could hear the surprise in their voices, even through the alien language. He was 15 meters from them now, still advancing, still moving in patterns that made targeting him nearly impossible. 3 spears came simultaneously from different angles. A coordinated strike meant to box him in. Marcus jumped, tucking his knees, and all 3 passed beneath him. He landed rolling, came up in a sprint. 9 down. 3 remaining. The final 3 warriors threw together, compensating for his movement, leaving their targets. Marcus saw the geometry of it, the way they'd calculated his speed and vector. They'd assumed he'd maintain his current trajectory. He stopped dead. All 3 spears sailed past his position, missing by comfortable margins. 12 spears. 12 misses. Marcus stood in the sudden silence, breathing hard, hands still empty and raised. Blood trickled from the graze on his shoulder. His flight suit was torn and dirty. But he was alive, and he was now only 10 meters from the semicircle of warriors. They stared at him with what Marcus interpreted as shock. The large warrior in bone armor took a step forward, his expression unreadable. He said something that sounded like a question. Marcus slowly lowered his hands. He looked at each warrior in turn, meeting their large eyes with his own. Then he looked at the 12 spears embedded in the ground behind him, creating a trail of near misses that spoke to reflexes and awareness no one present had expected. He looked back at the large warrior and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a persistence hunter, of a species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain, not through strength or claws, but through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. It was the smile of an ape that had looked at the stars and decided they belonged to him. "My turn," Marcus said quietly. He moved, not toward the warriors, but toward the nearest spear embedded in the ground. He pulled it free with one smooth motion, testing its weight and balance. Lighter than he expected, the balance point slightly forward. He shifted his grip, adjusted his stance. The warriors tensed, weapons rising. The large warrior held up a hand, stopping them. His eyes were fixed on Marcus, with an intensity that transcended species. Marcus took 3 running steps and threw. The spear flew straight and true, covering 30 meters in a heartbeat. It slammed point first into a tree at the village's edge, the shaft quivering from the impact. The blade had buried itself 3 inches into the dense wood. Silence held the valley. Marcus walked calmly to the next spear, pulled it free, and threw again. Another tree, another solid impact. He moved to the 3rd spear, then the 4th, each throw precise and powerful. The warriors watched with expressions ranging from confusion to what Marcus hoped was dawning respect. When he reached the 12th spear, he paused. Instead of throwing it, he reversed his grip, planted the butt in the ground, and stood leaning on it slightly, catching his breath. Blood still seeped from his shoulder, and his legs trembled with exhaustion and dehydration. But he kept his expression calm. The large warrior approached slowly, stopping just beyond spear range. He studied Marcus for a long moment, then glanced at the 12 spears embedded in 12 trees, creating a pattern that demonstrated accuracy and strength. He looked back at Marcus and said something in his clicking language. Marcus shook his head. "I don't understand." The warrior touched his own chest. "Kalen." Understanding dawned. Marcus touched his own chest. "Marcus." Kalen nodded slowly. He turned to the other warriors and spoke rapidly, gesturing toward Marcus, the spears, and the forest. A discussion erupted, voices rising and falling in their musical language. Marcus waited, swaying slightly, wondering if he just earned respect or confirmed himself as a threat. Finally, Kalen turned back to Marcus and made a gesture toward the village. He mimed drinking, then eating. Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. He nodded, "Thank you." Kalen's expression might have been a smile. He walked toward the village, and Marcus followed, still carrying the 12th spear. As they entered the settlement, children peeked from doorways with wide eyes. Adults emerged, murmuring in their language, pointing at the human who had died.